A week away. I can hardly get that out of my mouth. It's so impossible for me to believe. A couple of piggyback things. Number one, I'm always grateful when we have a band. We have Nina Swanson on the keyboard. We have Nathan on the bass. Nathan on the bass is a guest with us today. And we have our man Don on the drums. And we have an amazing choir. And that's a great song for the little muffins to sing. Did you notice we got festive around here? Yeah. Not a moment too soon. So we'll just leave them up in January so that we can get our full enjoyment out of them. We had some little Christmas elves whose name I won't mention other than Mary Tomes and Barbara Crumvita and Linda Blacksmith and Ruth Geary. Those are our elves this year. Thank you much. So that's all the preamble. Oh, Gretchen helped for a couple minutes. No. No, she happened to stop by, and I'm like, hey, if you're in the mood, we're going to decorate. So she did stay until she had to leave for an appointment. So you need to listen fast this morning because we're covering a lot of ground. We're doing the Reader's Digest condensed version, right? Just the highlights. We don't need a lot of detail, right? The Reader's Digest condensed version of the two stories. There are 4 Gospels and 2 stories of the birth of Jesus. Now, in the Gospel of Matthew was written primarily for the Jewish audience who followed Jesus' teachings. Remember, that was kind of the rub in the temple, and we'll get to that this spring in Lent. So this gospel is written for the Jewish audience who followed Jesus, and Matthew is the star of the story in, Pete. Joseph was the guy's name. Yes, I did go to seminary, and they did tell us that. Joseph is the guy's name, and he shows up in the Gospel of Matthew. Get all of our names straight. And the point that the writers of Matthew needed to make was that Joseph's lineage, if I remember right, it was 14 generations. They needed to track him all the way back to the great grandfather of the nation of Israel, and that was Abraham. Got some bright folks here today. So Abraham is like the granddaddy of the whole nation of Israel. And the story that features Mary is actually the Gospel of Luke. And those writers were writing for the audience of Gentile Christians that lived in the Roman Empire. So we're going to hit the highlights from these 2 stories, and I do mean highlights. And in Unity, I love the way that we use the Bible. We don't just read the Bible, we use the Bible. And our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, wrote this amazing tome called the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. His belief is, and my belief also, is that every character, every place in the Bible means something, has a significance, and that we can find that within ourselves. I do believe that this is our story. It seems like a really, really old story about a guy that lived a very long time ago, and there's a whole bunch of different opinions about why he came here, and we'll talk about that this spring too, so you'll want to come back for Lent. We find ourselves in the story. We can identify with each of the characters. We can identify with the places that the characters traveled. All right, here we go. Joseph and Mary were engaged, not betrothed. They had not been familiar with one another. And Mary is found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. So Joseph, being the stand-up guy he is, was preparing to run. I mean, it's a really awkward situation and hard to explain because apparently it wasn't him, and then all of a sudden his fiancée is expecting, and what do you do with that? So he was going to take off, and then an angel. Angels in the Bible always represent messenger from God. An angel visits Joseph in a dream. Joseph is a big dreamer. And the angel says, "Hey, pal, this is yours to do." So we're going to skip to the 3 wise men. They came from the east, which is our regions of wisdom. And these 3 wise men had this star that they were following, and it led them to Jerusalem and to our good King Herod. So they said to Herod, "Where is the new king? Where is the baby born king of the Jews?" They asked the king Herod. So he was a little put out by that question. But the thing is, he's in Jerusalem, and the wise men go to Jerusalem. Jerusalem is of spiritual peace. So basically, anytime we go into prayer or meditation, we can be showing up in Jerusalem. Now, Herod, he wasn't a really nice guy. He was very insecure, very sensitive about his kingdom and his territory. And he really is operating in life and ruling from the personal will, from the human consciousness. Didn't have a whole lot of evident spirituality. So with Herod in our midst, we're all Herod here and there. And with Herod in our midst, we have to be on guard, watching, being mindful about our sense consciousness, our human level consciousness. Tender care of the little baby divine idea that has already been born deep down in our hearts. So Herod says to the wise men, well, because Herod had asked somebody, he didn't know. So he says to the wise men, well, they're over in Bethlehem. So you trot over there and check in on them, and then if you wouldn't mind popping by, letting me know where he is, I'd like to pay homage to him. So it's another long story, but what Herod eventually does is send his warriors over there and has every boy under the age of 2 murdered. Christianity, the history's so good, isn't it? Just people talk about the religion of peace, and I go, have you read the history of Christianity? So the wise men go to Bethlehem. And Bethlehem is a really cool place because it's the city of the living. Bethlehem is, it's our spiritual sustenance. It's our spiritual nourishment. And what's happening in Bethlehem is this holy union of divine wisdom and divine love. So the wise men bring not food, not blankets, not, let's see, what else would you bring? Oh, diapers, some warm clothing for the baby. They bring gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So the gifts that the Magi bring represent the qualities of mind that we are given by divine wisdom. Our 3 smart bears left Bethlehem, did not pop back to see King Herod, because they have now been in the presence of divine consciousness, and they know better than to let Herod in on what's going on. So they leave by way of another country. They leave by way of another state of consciousness. Herod was infuriated, and that's when he sent over to murder the little boys. So in another dream, dream number 2, after the baby's born, Joseph is told, grab Mary and the baby and hightail it over to Egypt. Herod is hot on your trail. Now, we get the drift that Joseph is a really obedient guy. Like, once he made the commitment up front that he wouldn't run, that he'd stay in and do his thing, he just follows every divine message, every divine direction that he gets. Back in the Hebrew Bible, there were a whole lot of takeovers and a whole lot of exiles, but at some point, this whole gang of people end up in Babylon, and they were slaves to the Babylonians, and that was the beginning of the formation of the nation of Israel. It was Moses that brought them out. So why go back to Egypt? Egypt is the land of darkness and mystery. So that's kind of a double-edged sword, right? So a divine idea comes manifest in our world. Joseph certainly wasn't expecting it, and we'll find out that Mary wasn't either. So this divine idea comes to us, it comes manifest, and if we've had an experience with getting those unavoidable directions, we know that it's a mystery to us, and we're kind of in the dark about what to do with it. So Egypt is a good place to go. And the other thing about Egypt is, in our earthly realm, the spiritual image of God, right? We're all born spirit first, and then we put on these skin suits. So our Egypt state is essential to the preservation of the spiritual body. We're nurturing it. Our divine idea's first task is to survive long enough to unfold, and that requires that we nurture that divine idea. So there they stayed in Egypt until King Herod was dead. He finally got old and died. Now, Herod being dead is pretty significant because, right, that's our ruling will, that's our insecurity, that's our jealousy, that's our propensity to reach out and destroy anybody that disagrees with us. How dare they? So it's important that while we're in Egypt, nurturing this soul, this spiritual idea, our personal will evaporates. It is finally not the driver of the bus anymore, and it is overcome by this spiritual consciousness. Dream number 3. The angel comes to Joseph and says, pack your bags, they didn't have any, pack your bags and hightail it over to Israel. We sang, O come, Emmanuel. The metaphysical interpretation of Emmanuel is God is with us. It's one of my favorite songs. And it says, ransom captive Israel. Captive under King Herod, captive under the sense consciousness, the personal will. So he says, go to Israel. We started out in Bethlehem, right? Go to Bethlehem for the birth. So Bethlehem, the city of the living, our spiritual nourishment and sustenance. And then we go to Egypt, that place where it's kind of mysterious and dark, and we're nurturing this tiny little embryo of a divine idea. So we get that taken care of, and then we're told to go to Israel. Israel is really big. It means God is with us. Go to be with God. So the interesting thing about this journey, going way back to Abraham, but starting in the modern story of Bethlehem, Jesus being born, Joseph and Mary taking it to Egypt, the baby, and then coming to Israel, that journey is so necessary for all of us in order to birth spiritual nature, in order to see spiritual nature in one another. And perhaps most importantly, we need that journey in order to see our own spirituality, that we are born out of the energy of love. So Joe and the family left Egypt. They settled in Nazareth. Nazareth. Here's an interesting place. Nazareth isn't like, a big deal. It's not a big revered city like, how you say, Jerusalem. Doesn't have the cool aura that Bethlehem has. Nazareth is like this village of common people, just everyday people. And this is where they take the newborn king. That says something about what Jesus came here to do. I just put that together. So they go to Nazareth, and Jesus lives among people like you and me, commonplace sense consciousness. Every once in a while we slip into spirituality for a moment or two, and then we come back to being our beloved human selves. And the point is that even in our everyday common thinking, common consciousness, that the truth of the Christ consciousness is expressed. That's why Nazareth is important. And there Jesus lived happily ever after until the day they crucified him. So now, he was 33, by the way, 3 years in the ministry. So now we're sliding over to the Gospel of Luke. Luke's written for a more general audience, and we see the story from Mary's point of view. Her cousin Elizabeth was pregnant, and that's a whole other backstory. But Elizabeth was in her 6th month. We're in Luke chapter 1. Elizabeth is in her 6th. Don't be afraid, for you have found favor with God. And now you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you will name him Jesus. A visit from an angel, say you're going to carry a baby, it's going to be a boy, so buy blue, and you're going to name him Jesus. Gabriel. The wisdom of our divine nature. The wisdom contacts divine love, causing us to be aware of the Christ within. So Mary at first says, I don't think so. Maybe you have the wrong address. And so the angel talks to her some more, and Mary says, you know what, I will do this. I will. And then she trots off to see Elizabeth, and those two women have quite the exchange. So check out the first couple chapters of Luke to catch. God said to Abraham was, go forth and multiply. There's going to be millions of you. There will be nations of you. And here's my promise. I will be the long journey. I mean, we're talking riding on a donkey, I'm sure. And I don't know how many miles it was, but, you know, that's how people got around. And Joseph walked, I'm sure. So surely her labor was induced by this really long journey, because suddenly, even before the census, the baby's ready to be born. So they discover there's no room in the inn. We have no space for your divine idea. You take that divine idea, Joseph as my midwife. So then this happens. In that region, there were shepherds living in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. So the angel said, "Do not be afraid, for see, I am bringing you great news of great joy for all the people. Unto you is born this day in the city of David the Savior, who is the Messiah. This will be a sign for you." Mary, Joseph represents wisdom and obedience, right? But Mary, we're overshadowed because this divine idea is so much bigger, so much greater, so much grander than we can ever imagine. The only way we can fulfill it is to lean into spirit. It's not ours to do from our limited human consciousness. Trust me, says Spirit. All I'm asking you to do is take the first step. So giving birth in a manger symbolizes the idea that the divine idea can birth itself right? They went back to Nazareth, even through common everyday people. And thus we give birth to the Christ consciousness. We must be expectant, we must be devout, and we must be believing that we have what it takes to do what ours is to do. Obviously, I think many of us can attest to this. It can be quite overwhelming to be the light, to be the consciousness that can give birth to an even greater light. Here we are, going about the business of our lives, building it board by board. Here we are, just rolling along, believing that we'll never be chosen to manifest a divine idea. Here we are, believing that the Holy Spirit would never tap us on the back and say, "This is yours to do. This is yours to do." In every single Advent season, there's another layer, there's more depth, there's more to own and to suit up with. We are called to wake up. We're called to wake up and know that divine ideas are yearning to be born from us. We are called to wake up and know that we have everything it takes, leaning into spirit to bring this divine idea into manifest in our own unique way. So our invitation for this very last week of Advent, I can't believe we're talking about the last week, very last week of Advent, let us reflect on our story, finding and relating to Joseph, finding and relating to Mary, listening for our angels. Let's take this into meditation, please. Love came down at Christmas. So think about the consciousness that we have built over the last few weeks. Standing on faith, our firm foundation. That Spirit is in our midst. Living from a place of peace, knowing that we can never be separate from Spirit. Knowing that peace truly and really begins with me. I can't expect somebody else to be first. And now we add to our foundation our awareness of the energy of divine love. That great energy that connects and binds all of humankind. Connects us back to Source, the divine energy out of which we are born. So as we step into our temple this morning, I invite you to put on your extra listening ears and see what the angels have for you. What idea is yearning to come through you, to come into our world through your intention and your energy and your love. Be still and know that I am God.